our best. It's Tuesday here on The Story, and we've got a packed show for you. Good news for downtown Portland. Foot traffic. Around the holiday season, we've got new numbers. Plus, the Greater Idaho movement is back at it in Salem, introducing bills to spur talks in a task force to move Oregon's border, where those bills stand now. But first, a crackdown on homelessness in the California Bay Area targets not just the homeless themselves, but those who help the homeless. It's our big story tonight. But before we get to that story, breaking news tonight as President Trump goes on a firing spree at the Justice Department, removing all of the U.S. attorneys appointed by former President Joe Biden. The president says the move is meant to, quote, restore confidence to have a, quote, fair justice system. That includes the U.S. attorney for the District of Oregon, Natalie White. She was nominated by former President Biden in 2022 and confirmed a few months later. Now she's out of a job. The first assistant U.S. attorney slides into her place for now until President Trump nominates someone new. Well, now back to our big story. Rules around homelessness are tightening across the country as cities grapple with how to address the growing crisis, one we've watched play out for years on the streets of downtown Portland. But one California city is taking a new and far more strict approach. Last week, the Fremont City Council in the Bay Area voted to ban homeless camping within the city, but they also are targeting those who try and help the homeless.
At first, it made me feel sad and frustrated.
Katie O'Brien runs Rosehaven, a Northwest Portland day shelter and community center for homeless women and families.
I feel bad. I feel bad that people are going to have to think twice before they go to support somebody.
The ordinance in the city of Fremont, California, criminalizes aiding and abetting people who camp on the streets, meaning anyone who helps someone in a homeless encampment, if caught, could be charged with a misdemeanor and face a $1,000 fine, 6 months in jail, or both. If something like that happened here in Portland, it could put Rosehaven at risk, as they help around 150 people each day.
We hand out sleeping bags, tarps, clothing, hygiene products, whatever anybody needs to stabilize.
Like Colette.
So the tents come in handy, because in my situation, I don't know what to do.
She's 60 years old and stays with her dog. In this green tent outside the Southwest Portland apartment building she was just evicted from.
Like, my situation it's not because I want to be out here by any means.
Fremont, the Bay Area city that recently voted to criminalize those who help the homeless, has a total of 615 people, like Colette, living unsheltered, according to a recent point-in-time count.
Like in many California cities, homelessness is one of the biggest problems that people report in Fremont and just throughout the Bay Area in general.
Marisa Kendall is a reporter covering homelessness for Cal Matters, a nonprofit newspaper based in Sacramento that specializes in complex California policies. Marisa watched live the heated 5-hour Fremont City Council meeting when this ordinance was adopted by a 6-1 vote.
On its face, this is a very strict ordinance because it would ban camping everywhere, all throughout the entire city. But that in and of itself isn't that unusual. A lot of cities in California in recent months have passed similar ordinances. Some are equally as strict in that regard. But what was really unique here was the fact that this ordinance also makes it a misdemeanor to conceal, aid, or abet a homeless encampment. So that really had service providers pretty concerned because now they are worried, well, when I do work, going out to an encampment, handing out food and clothing, maybe even tents, helping get people signed up for services, can I be at risk?
It turns out the definition of aid and abet in this situation is not entirely clear.
So from the very beginning, the mayor brought up the aiding and abetting clause and expressed his desire to change it or remove it. Several other city council members expressed the same desire. But then they heard over and over again throughout the meeting from the city attorney, who said the way the ordinance is written, it cannot be used to target outreach workers who hand out food or water or other necessities. He said because the crime in the ordinance is camping, or storing personal property in public spaces, you can only be targeted if you aid or abet that specific action.
Despite those assurances from the Fremont city attorney, Marisa says advocates are still worried.
Because the text of the ordinance itself does not specify what aiding and abetting is. It does not specify, that an advocate won't be arrested for giving someone a tent, but will be arrested for helping them set it up, for example.
I think that's wrong. They're just doing what's right for others.
We are helping people survive in an environment that is very, very scary and very difficult to live in right now. And I would say that we aren't enabling, that we are stabilizing people.
This ordinance will go into effect next month, and enforcement is still unclear. Similar to Portland, Fremont officers said they will target the most problematic campsites first. As for enforcing the aiding and abetting piece of the ordinance, Marisa tells me that remains to be decided. But that the city attorney continued to say handing out food and water will not be an offense. Marisa says it's also entirely possible this won't be enforced at all, and there will be no arrests for aiding and abetting, given how limited police resources are. But she says experts she talked with worry that just having that wording on the books could have a chilling effect on aid being provided in camps. And we'll have to wait and see how it plays out and if other West Coast cities follow suit. All right, so what do you think of Fremont's ordinance? Would you want something like that here? Why or why not? Let us know. Email the story at kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090. All right, now let's talk about the city of Portland and foot traffic downtown. This past weekend, the Portland Winter Light Festival wrapped up its 10th year with light installations all over the city. Thousands showed up to check them out over the past 2 weeks. It capped off a pretty good holiday season for downtown Portland, according to Prosper Portland, which is the city's economic development agency. Their data shows a lot more people came out to holiday events in downtown Portland than in past years. And some new events this year did well too. This graph right here shows some of the big events and how attendance changed over the past 2 years. The bright green is the 2024 holiday season and the light blue there is 2023. Every big event had more people this past year than the year before.
3, 2, 1.
Okay, let's get into the numbers. The tree lighting at Pioneer Courthouse Square, which was on the day after Thanksgiving, had more than 1,000 more attendees than the year before. Prosper Portland estimates more than 18,000 people came out to see the tree light up. And another newer holiday event had a big year as well. Here's what the crew of the Winter Ice Rink said as they were setting up in November.
We had about 20,000 people last year, and we expect to probably double that this year.
Well, they didn't quite double the numbers, but the Winter Ice Rink at the west end of the Morrison Bridge had around 3,000 more people come out to ice skate than in 2023. 25,000 people came out to ice skate on the rink in just its second year downtown, compared with 22,000 the year before. The Portland Bazaar got about 800 more people, and the Holiday Brew Fest attracted nearly 2,000 more people. More than 8,000 people came out for the Tuba Christmas, the Christmas concert featuring nearly 300 tuba players, an increase over the 5,000 the year before. And 3,500 people attended the Great Figgy Pudding Caroling competition. And the New Year's Eve celebration at Pioneer Courthouse Square brought a huge crowd for its first year. Prosper Portland estimates 12,000 people came out to the dance party and drone show. Now, those are the kinds of numbers Portland leaders are hoping the state pays attention to, especially while lawmakers are in session and trying to figure out where the state's money should go. In fact, the Portland Metro Chamber released a report this month saying that Portland plays an outsized role in bringing in revenue for the state. And they say the health of Portland is deeply intertwined with the health of the entire state. The Metro Chamber says their data shows that Multnomah, Washington, and Clackamas counties together are the home to half the jobs in the state and creates 57.5% of the state's gross domestic product, or GDP, despite having only 42% of the state's population. In their report, they wrote that the study, quote, demonstrates that a resilient and growing Portland region should not just be a local priority. It's a strategic investment in Oregon's shared future, because they say investments made in Portland and Multnomah County ripple across the rest of the state, driving revenue that supports communities statewide. They say the metro region also provides an outsized share of tax revenue for the state. Multnomah County has 19% of the state's population, but brings in nearly 24% of the state's tax revenue. The three counties together bring in more than 53% of the tax revenue, again, with just 42% of the population. Well, now to the State House in Olympia, where lawmakers are pushing to outlaw a poison sold for years on Amazon. It was used by dozens of young people across the country to end their own lives, including a teen from our area in Clark County. The bill comes after a King 5 investigation exposed Amazon for continuing to sell the product despite repeated warnings to pull it from its site. Susanna Frame reports.
Please go ahead whenever you're ready.
Distinguished members of the committee, my name is Michelle Vasquez-Stickley.
Michelle Vasquez-Stickley of Camas, Washington, urged lawmakers to make this poison, 99% pure sodium nitrite, illegal in Washington. It's what her son Tyler, at just 15 years old, secretly bought on Amazon, then ingested to end his life.
This preventable tragedy makes one thing clear. Companies like Amazon must be held accountable, and stronger consumer protections are desperately needed to safeguard our children.
Tyler is one of at least 30 young people across the country we've confirmed died the exact same way, buying sodium nitrite on Amazon, then using it for suicide. Last year, the King 5 investigators exposed Amazon continued to sell the product that has no household use whatsoever, while grieving parents begged the company to take it off the site.
Nothing. They didn't do anything.
Meredith Mitchell of Colorado tried for 2 years to get Amazon to take action after her son Aiden took his life with the product.
This child was my life, and to them it meant nothing. Like my son's life meant nothing to them.
After several young people died, 2.5 years ago, Amazon took sodium nitrite off its site voluntarily. But nothing prevents that company or anyone else from selling it again. If the bill passes to permanently ban it, we would become the 4th state in the country to do so.
I'm Charlotte Mena, State Representative for the 29th Legislative District.
Prime sponsor, Representative Charlotte Mena, says this will send a message from the state of Washington.
To let folks know that we're setting a standard here and we're not going to allow this product to be sold. We're going to make sure that we're continuing to do what we can to provide resources and ensure that we're removing these sorts of easily accessible, harmful products.
Tyler Schmidt's family is one of 24 others currently suing Amazon for knowingly selling the product when they'd been warned young people were using it for suicide. His mom told lawmakers her mission is to make sure it's never sold in Washington again.
To ensure no other parent must bear this pain, let's prioritize lives over profits and act to make a difference now.
So far, the bill sailed through the House on a 91-4 vote earlier this month. It's now waiting to be heard in a Senate committee. The bill includes an emergency clause, meaning that if it passes the Senate and the governor signs it, it would take effect immediately. Well, coming up next on the story, we're heading to Salem, where a few bills in the legislature are trying to push forward with a familiar movement that we've covered a lot here on the story. Greater Idaho, how these bills differ from past attempts, and whether or not it appears they're going anywhere. That's when the story returns. It's been a while since we've talked about the Greater Idaho movement here on The Story. And while it may be back of mind for many of us here in the metro, it's top of mind to a lot of folks out east. In case you're wondering what Greater Idaho is, it started in 2020. The goal is to move the Oregon border to the west to create one big Idaho. Supporters say people in eastern Oregon don't feel like lawmakers in Salem take their concerns seriously, and they would better align with Idaho's conservative legislature. For those hearing about this for the first time, you're likely thinking, yeah, right, no way that would ever happen. And that's a very reasonable thought, since this thing would need approvals at the state and federal level, which are very unlikely. But it has not stopped people in eastern Oregon from taking steps towards the improbable possibility. So far, voters in 13 Oregon counties have approved local ballot questions related to the Greater Idaho movement. These are not move the border now type of questions, since that would not be legal. They're more about asking their current elected leaders to have meetings about the impacts of a border move. And now there are two Greater Idaho bills in Salem. One is more of the same, regarding talks about a border move, but the other would create a task force to explore how something like this could happen. House Bill 3488 would create the Move Oregon-Idaho Border Task Force to look at the impacts of a border move on residents and businesses, as well as a process that would have to happen to actually move the border. The bill directs the task force to prepare a report with that information by January of 2027. The bill had its first reading in the House earlier this month and was referred to a committee where it's been for the past week and a half without any hearing scheduled. The other piece of legislation in Salem is Senate Joint Memorial 7, which is less of a bill and more of a recommendation. It urges Oregon and Idaho to simply talk about moving borders. They had its first reading in the Senate in mid-January, was referred to a committee more than a month ago, and has no hearing scheduled. So it's not looking good. The Idaho legislature passed a similar memorial in 2023, which has not really led to anything. Now, for this to actually happen, it would require approval of both legislatures in Salem and Boise, and then approval from the U.S. Congress in D.C. Again, a long shot. Idaho's governor has publicly supported border talks, but it's been crickets from Governor Tina Kotek. In fact, the Greater Idaho website even has this helpful little counter in the bottom corner noting how many days it's been since they sent a letter to Governor Kotek last summer inviting her to meet. 222 days and counting. But the lack of interest from the legislature and Governor Kotek has not stopped the Greater Idaho campaign from putting their movement in front of lawmakers, whether they like it or not. There are 5 billboards in the Salem area touting the movement, but it's not all rah-rah Idaho in eastern Oregon. Check out this billboard near the town of Lapine in Deschutes County. A man named David Arlant told the news team at the Wallowa Chieftain that he paid nearly $5,000 to put up the billboard, showing that there are people in eastern Oregon who love being a part of Oregon. Now, it just so happens that billboard is near the home of the founder of the Greater Idaho movement, Mike McCarter, who lives in Lapine. Arlant told the chieftain's staff that another reason he put the billboard there was to, quote, get in McCarter's face. So, if lawmakers have to see Greater Idaho billboards in Salem, McCarter gets to see some love for Oregon not far from home. All right, coming up next on The Story, grab your shovel. We're digging for old with your help. Last week, we showed you this incredible footage from Oregon's centennial celebration in 1959, and you sent us your artifacts from that birthday party of sorts more than 60 years ago. That's next when The Story returns. As President Trump's administration picks up momentum in Washington, D.C., its effects are felt far and wide, including here in the Northwest. Thousands of U.S. Parks and Forest Service workers have been fired as the administration aims to cut costs across the federal government. That decision left many now former employees outraged. Thomas Schultz has a story.
Big changes are underway across U.S. national parks and forests after 4,400 employees were abruptly fired over the past few days.
We didn't really get much notice at all, if any.
Liz Crandall has worked as a permanent field ranger in the Deschutes National Forest since November 2023. Before that, she spent 7 years working seasonally for the Forest Service.
I love what I do. I love protecting the land and being out in the forest and talking to the public.
Though on Saturday, like many of her colleagues who maintain trails, guide visitors, and clean bathrooms, Crandall learned she'd been fired.
So I found out on Saturday at 3 p.m.
leaving her scrambling to figure out what to do next.
It's very, very sad. I feel very sad and very angry and just baffled by this entire situation.
The mass firing sparked large protests in Bellingham, Washington Monday.
It was like having the rug pulled out from under me.
At North Cascades National Park just east of Mount Baker, visitors added more than $26 million to the local economy in 2023.
All the people I work with are like family, and just imagining not working with them anymore it hurts.
Nationally, America's parks brought in $55.6 billion to the economy, supporting more than 400,000 jobs.
People are devastated.
Already, cuts could be impacting hikers. Signs near Snoqualmie Pass in Washington show a trailhead closed due to these firings. And in Oregon, former workers say they'll see those same issues soon.
Campgrounds are going to not be opening. Trailheads are going to not be maintained. Toilets might be locked.
Thomas Schultz, KGW News.
Well, on Friday, the team brought back our Digging for Old series, showing you this footage from 1959 of the Oregon Centennial Expo in Portland, celebrating 100 years of Oregon statehood. Now, we asked if you had any items from the Centennial celebration, and several of you surprised us, sending us pictures of some really cool artifacts from more than 60 years ago. A viewer named Bev told us she remembered the Centennial as a big deal, especially for her as a 7-year-old at the time. She has these two items, her dad's bow tie and a glass. She remembers her parents and grandparents getting all dressed up for the event. And Steve still has some items from the Centennial. He also has one of those bow ties to go along with some lighters and a decorative plate celebrating both Oregon and Hawaii, which gained statehood in 1959. Now, Alice told us that along with the Portland celebration in that summer, there was a ceremony in Salem at the fairgrounds that she was a part of. She was a bluebird that year, similar to a Girl Scout, and she got to hold a garland at the Salem ceremony. She tells us she loved her Centennial dress. And finally, Lynn told us she has two items celebrating Oregon's 100th birthday. First is this large print she found in her grandmother's basement, which is just beautiful. Lynn says she now has it framed at home. And her other item is this Jim Beam bottle from 1959 that she found at an antique shop many years ago. It has that nice raised design there, and she pointed out to us that there are two beavers guarding the top of the bottle. Very cool. Well, that is the end of our show, folks. Thanks so much for watching. The good stuff is coming your way next. And don't forget, everyone has a story to tell. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of your Tuesday night. I'll see you right back here tomorrow night at 6:30.